We're getting more news that's coming in right now. Geeta, just stay on with us. The information that we're getting now from sources within the Indian Ministry of External Affairs is that China requested for talks with Prime Minister Modi at the BRICS summit. So they wanted a bilateral engagement. MEA sources say that Prime Minister Modi-Xi meet was informal. After speculation over Modi seeking talks with Xi, Centre now clarifies, the MEA clarifies that China sought time to meet Modi, but of course they met otherwise on the sidelines. Geeta Mohan is joining us for more on this. Geeta, what more can you tell us?
Again, Pallavi, when it comes to India and China, it becomes a very interesting story. On India and China, the Chinese side in their statement yesterday had claimed that it was an informal meeting that took place where the border issues were raised on the insistence of Prime Minister Modi. And now sources are telling us that, well, the conversation for a bilateral meeting, like a structured bilateral meeting, was pending from the Chinese side, and it is during the BRICS summit, on the sidelines of the BRICS summit, that an informal conversation, what in diplomatic terms we also call a pull-aside, took place, and that happened on the sidelines of the BRICS summit. The two leaders must have come face-to-face and they had that informal conversation. But to say that it was on the insistence of one side or the other, which the Chinese side claimed, certainly the Indian side are rejecting with the information that we are getting right now, saying that the bilateral meeting, the request for a bilateral meeting was pending from the Chinese side. So with India and China, expect at least some sort of a difference in how they view and they perceive, not only at the border, but even when it comes to diplomatic terms, language and process and approach. For the Chinese side, they continue to claim that it was on the insistence of the Indian side and Prime Minister Modi. And on the Indian side, sources in the government have told India Today that it was on the insistence of the Chinese side. However, when it comes to a bilateral meeting, that really did not take place. It was not a structured bilateral as Prime Minister had with Ethiopia, Senegal, Mozambique and Iran. And so did President Xi with many other African nations, including Tanzania and Malawi. But over here, it was a pull-aside. Pull-asides normally do not happen on the insistence or invitation of any country. It just happens when the leadership find an opportunity and want to speak. If they do not want to speak, they would have not made an effort at all. The fact that an effort was made and that there was a pull-aside, but a very brief conversation, the reading of it are two-pronged. One is that they did want to have a conversation. It is not a complete leadership intervention, but yes, they did have a conversation on resolving the border issues. This comes days ahead, less than 2 weeks ahead of the G20 summit that India is going to host in New Delhi. On the other hand, the fact that there has been no breakthrough, the fact that it was not a structured bilateral, clearly shows that the intent and intention is not absolutely in place when it comes to withdrawal, complete disengagement, and going back to the pre-2020 or 2019 status. So there are issues over here. Doesn't seem like the current border crisis is going to be resolved anytime soon or ahead of the G20. But like we are looking at reports and the meetings that have taken place at the Chushul border between India and China, it does seem like there is some sort of an intent of a pullback. Now, where and to what extent is certainly something we'll have to see, because those details have not been divulged yet. However, again, India and China, when it comes to their perception and approach to even a meeting, can vary. And over here, it has varied to quite an extent, where the two sides are insisting that it was the other that sought a meeting.
Geeta, thank you so much for putting things into perspective for us. As Geeta said, that pull-aside, of course, comes just a couple of weeks ahead of that big G20 meet in Delhi, and hence it assumes that much more significance. But the Indian side, they're clarifying that it was the Chinese side which had put in a request. There was a pending request for a bilateral meeting with President Xi and Prime Minister Narendra Modi. What happened, of course, was an informal exchange on the sidelines of the BRICS summit. Now, Prime Minister Modi talks tough after Johannesburg handshake.